Back to England with the commandos goes a mixed bag. Local quislings and captured German officers. And 350 Norwegian patriots dedicated to democracy's cause, the liberation of their country. Target, Spitsbergen. Ocean, the Arctic. Date, August 1941. Spitsbergen's rich coal deposits and key weather stations are important to the Germans. They must be destroyed. The magnetic North draws raids of increasing scope and violence. A powerful commando force strikes at Norway's Vogso Island in December 1941 to weaken the enemy hold and reduce his power over the sea lanes of the Arctic, which connect England and the United States with Soviet Russia, now an ally. But Vogso is heavily fortified, and stubborn German defenders fight back. When the raid is over, 150 Germans are dead. More military installations wrecked. More patriots liberated. More quislings captured. And the commandos head for home as their countrymen, together with the Americans, determined to get supplies to desperate Russia, no matter what the cost. An ally is in peril, and a lifeline is flung across the top of the world. It is the most expeditious way of feeding embattled Russia from democracy's arsenal. The shortest route. But for the pregnant ships, the grimmest, the harshest, the cruelest. At German air bases in Norway and Finland, detailed reports on convoy movements come in from long-range reconnaissance planes. The Nazis have a magnificently effective plan to change the color of the Arctic from white to red. How? Slaughter. 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 smokescreen, a device to hide the convoy and confuse the attack. Any and all means of defense must be taken against the terror about to strike. High-level bombers and low-level bombers, torpedo planes and strafing planes, submarines, the entire holocaust of Nazi fury. The attack goes on, relentless, unbroken. But while the convoy reels under the slugging, more death is on the way. The German surface fleet lurks in hidden Norwegian fjords, waiting to smother any surviving Allied ships. The mightiest warships in the German Navy, von Tirpitz, Scharnhorst, Scheer, Prinz Eugen, Lutzow, are poised to thwart the Allied lifelines. Too wary to be brought to open battle, the ships sortie only for sudden strikes. But when they do, the Royal Air Force catches them and smashes the Germans as the Germans smash the convoys. The Germans reel in the seesaw struggle for the Arctic, but the Murmansk convoys come close to full disaster. The German attacks continue around the clock, continue for days on end. If the Germans can choke off the flow of supplies to Russia, munitions, oil, food, machinery, guns, planes, tanks, trucks, the bleeding Red Army may collapse. The entire Allied cause may face defeat. The battle is in balance, and Goering's Luftwaffe spares nothing to tip the scales. In some convoys, Only one half of the ships survive. On no other sea route are losses so high, casualties so terrific. Even for those who survive the German onslaught, the end is not yet. Another ordeal, as fierce as enemy action, scourges the ships and men of the Murmansk run. The name of the ordeal, weather. The goal. Journey's end. Through its ice-free harbor pour many thousand tons of Allied supplies that sustain a friend whose call for help we are pledged to answer. Here American, British, and Canadian seamen make their proudest boast. Despite Nazi hell and Arctic high water, we deliver the goods. The goods that bolster Russia in her darkest hour and help stem the German hordes at Stalingrad. In miserable Murmansk, the suspicious Russians restrict the movements even of their own allies. But sometimes surviving Allied sailors meet Russian seamen as friends, as comrades in arms. Directly across the North Pole, the United States faces the Soviet Union on the Bering Sea, where the Aleutians stretch 1,000 miles toward Asia. Here, too, contact is made with the Russians. The United States Navy transfers ships of war to the Red Navy. And with the ships goes the knowledge of how to use them. Speeches, ceremony, full dress formality attend the transfer of the warships from one flag to the other. The stars and stripes give way to the hammer and sickle. But the rising sun also flies in these waters, and the Japanese prepare to plant it here permanently. The top of the world is a Japanese target, and she pinpoints Attu and Kiska for invasion as part of her overall strategy in the Pacific. The Aleutian Islands are to be the northern anchor of Japan's oceanic defense line. While the Imperial Japanese Navy hits tropical Midway, a mobile force splits off from the main body of the fleet and plunges into the Arctic. Alaska and Canada are threatened by invasion as enemy troops approach American soil. The Aleutians. Prophets of war have warned. One day Japan will seek to invade America through the Aleutians. The Japanese have come. 1942. Attu occupied, without opposition. Kiska occupied, without opposition. 10 forlorn Americans are captured at the Kiska weather station. At scattered, dreary, undermanned bases, like Dutch Harbor in the eastern Aleutians, American pilots braved the world's worst flying weather to harass and reconnoiter the Japanese. Their mission is to neutralize the enemy on Attu and Kiska, cut off his supplies and make the islands worthless, until men and ships can be gathered to recapture them. Attu and Kiska in Japanese hands menace the United States, but in American hands they will threaten Japan. Both sides fear attack by way of the Aleutians. Each side seeks to block the other. May 1943. The stubborn stalemate breaks. From Cold Harbor in Alaska, an assault force of 29 warships and transports set sail for Attu. It is America's third amphibious strike of the war. North Africa succeeded. The Guadalcanal landing was a success. But now the ships grope their way through navigational hazards unmatched in all the 7 seas. Treacherous currents, uncharted rocks, continual fog, raging storms. Plan calls for a landing on the island's south coast. The place? Massacre Bay. The orders: advance into Massacre Valley, where the enemy waits. Soldiers of the 7th Division, trained for desert fighting, find themselves at war in a freezing hell, where an invisible enemy defends himself with suicidal courage. The Japanese, dug deep in ridges, hidden in ravines, contest every yard, every foot. The fight is slow and costly. Massacre Valley lives up to its name. 2,300 Japanese die. 600 Americans die. But Attu is American again. and the Japanese evacuate Kiska, they will never return. Victory over the northern enemy is a desolate victory. The Arctic becomes a theater of military frustration. Nothing more happens to affect the outcome of World War II. Up where the Willowa whips with bone-piercing chill, and the skies are eternally gray. Conquest of Micronesia. Ranging far, sweeping wide, American warships venture deep into the Central Pacific. Bigger, faster, mightier carriers are the core of the task force destined to destroy the Japanese Empire. Around the carriers, the battleships are ringed. Around the battleships, the cruisers. Around the cruisers, destroyers. It is autumn, 1943. Radically new tactics are the United States Navy's answer to the challenge of World War II. The immediate targets are the Gilbert and Marshall Islands, scattered for 1,000 miles athwart the equator. Mandated to the Japanese in 1920, the islands are studded with enemy fortifications. Land-based planes cannot reach them. But the Navy's floating airfields audaciously sail into striking range and deliver the blows that lead to invasion, to conquest. Like homing pigeons, the Hellcats and Corsairs return. Mission accomplished. Marcus Island has been worked over, but the flying sailors will be back. The carriers are nibbling at their prey, preparing for the kill. Pilots make their combat intelligence reports. This information is the blueprint for future assaults. After hard-hitting months at sea, the task force returns to base, to Pearl Harbor. "18 months ago, the scene of the most humiliating military catastrophe in the history of the United States. Today, Pearl Harbor is the mightiest of bases, sheltering an ever-expanding fleet, ever-increasing assault forces. And only minutes away is Honolulu, a light-hearted haven in the midst of war, an interlude for sailors between battles. Assault troops. They come from places like Kansas, Alabama, and Oregon. They're destined for places like Tarawa, Kwajalein, and Eniwetok. The names are worlds apart, but global strategy demands they be brought together. Tokyo lies 4,000 miles westward by sea. It cannot be reached unless these men first suffer and bleed and die on intervening coral atolls that block the way. Victor of the Battle of Midway, Admiral Spruance, is named Commander, Central Pacific Forces, by his chief, Admiral Nimitz. Under Spruance, powerful fast carrier forces sail from Pearl Harbor to test the possibilities of sustaining seaborne air power far from base, far from land support. The fleet is out to strike and stay. New Essex-class carriers bring air power where air power is needed, anywhere, anytime. Each of the 27,000-ton ships can be driven through the water at a speed that keeps pace with the fastest units in the fleet. The hours are long from battle to battle, and between their bouts with death, the ship's company and the pilots live and play as best they can. For the 2,500 sailors, the ship is a seagoing city, organized for the routine of day-to-day existence, as well as the requirements of war. The business of warships is war, and the task force speeds steadily toward the target, into battle. The islands to be seized are part of Micronesia, the tiny islands. Strategy for the coming conquest is explained to the men who must execute the plans. While Marines claw up the Solomon Islands in the South Pacific, while soldiers push northwestward on New Guinea in the Southwest Pacific, the carrier groups smash at enemy defenses in the Central Pacific, compelling him to split his forces, confusing him as to the main line of attack. The hour for action approaches. In the middle of nowhere, every sailor in every part of the ship prepares for the coming attack. In the general mess, ship's cooks break out special chow they have stowed away for moments like this. Tense, long moments before battle. None says, but all know. Some shipmates, at ease today, will be dead or wounded tomorrow. Dawn and action come all too soon. It is later than they dare think. Carrier planes go in to bomb and strafe the target, and the ships unleash arsenals of shell fire. At Tarawa and Macon, at Kwajalein and Eniwetok, at Majuro, at Roy, and at Namur, sailors prepare the way for soldiers and Marines. No preparation can purge the landings of their terror. Japanese resistance makes an inferno of every beachhead, a hell of every shoreline. American troops are pushed to the limit of endurance, but they endure. Supply ships keep fighting ships at sea in combat. Though hundreds of miles from Pearl Harbor, though thousands of miles from California, there is no lack of essential ammunition, food, materiel, fuel, to keep the enemy on the run, to give those in battle more than they need to fight their fight. Spearhead invasion, but they lend close support to ground troops when and where needed. Other carriers roam far afield to pound down such enemy bastions as Truk, a formidable fleet anchorage in the Central Pacific, an island the Japanese have encrusted with armament, aircraft, pilots, and soldiers in their attempt to dominate Micronesia. Plane after plane, squadron after squadron, group after group. The carriers hurl skyward young pilots who will help break the Japanese hold on the Central Pacific. 12 fast carriers, 100 planes to every ship, fighting Hellcats, dive-bombing Dauntlesses, Avengers armed with torpedoes, winged warcraft fill the sky. Into combat information centers come the first warnings of counterattack, and all hands know the carriers will be the major targets. Radar data is swiftly translated into symbols and precisely plotted. The meaning of plot and symbol is all too clear, all too simple. Enemy planes approaching. direction officers order out the carrier's combat air patrol to intercept the attackers, beat them off, shoot them down. Burning islands, other carrier planes bomb and strafe in close support of the guy on the ground, who is slugging it out with a rifle, a carbine, or perhaps a hand grenade, flamethrower, or bayonet. But it works. American soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, as a team, crack and then pulverize the Japanese and their defenses. Island after island falls, and the Japanese never give up until they die. But there are always a few survivors, too stunned to fight on, too broken to resist. Back from the battle come the wounded and maimed. Back to the carriers come the shattered and crippled. planes and their pilots, the ships and their sailors, the landing troops have destroyed the Japanese in the Central Pacific. They have profoundly altered the course of World War II. They have torn over 800,000 square miles of Pacific Ocean area from the enemy. Tarawa, Kwajalein, Eniwetok, war. Tarawa, Kwajalein, Eniwetok, sacrifice. Tarawa, Kwajalein, Eniwetok, victory. Conquest of Micronesia. O God, we pray thee that the memory of our comrades fallen in battle be ever sacred in our hearts, and that the sacrifice which they have offered for our country's cause may be acceptable in thy sight. And may this sailor find repose with the plane in which he gave his life, that we might live. Into thy hands, O Lord, we commend the soul of thy servant departed, now called unto eternal rest. And we commit his body to the deep. Melanesian nightmare. The new Japanese target, Port Moresby, only 300 miles north of Australia, key to a vast strategic area. Daily come the bombers, daily comes destruction. Port Moresby blocks Japan's complete control of New Guinea, of Australia. It must be smashed. It must be taken. The Below Stanley mountain range stands between the Japanese base of Buna in northern New Guinea and Port Moresby in the south. Miles of jagged hills and gloomy gorges, steep escarpments and trackless jungle, a frightful natural barrier. But in July 1942, the Japanese began to move over the mountains. In their earlier amphibious attempt to take Port Moresby, they were turned back by the United States Navy at the Battle of the Coral Sea. Now the Japanese are forced into an overland trek of 1,000 man-killing miles to reach their target. Outside Port Moresby, where the Japanese must be met and stopped, is a steaming, tangled nightmare of tropical undergrowth and malarial mountain. This is the part of the world called Micronesia, the Black Islands. For the Allied soldiers, sailors, and airmen who must throw back the Japanese, the Micronesian nightmare begins. Papuan guides thread the troops through the jungle labyrinth. Australian infantry has stopped the Japanese a scant 30 miles from Port Moresby. Now it is the Allies who must advance through tortuous New Guinea, against a foe fiercely resisting.